Hello and welcome to another week of Riled Up with Andrew. Um, we will be going over a huge news week on the flesh and blood side of things. And on a more bookkeeping side, I'll be having next week. Well, I think we'll be doing this every Friday, 7 p.m. But I will also be doing a Everfest box opening or case opening on Sunday at 7, and then mail call on Tuesday. So I've got a whole bunch of more cards coming in. Got a couple hundred, got a bunch of comics. We'll review that and get some more then. But this is Riled Up. So we've had quite a news week when it comes to Flesh and Blood. First off, I think and most importantly, Dev Talk 9 dropped. So, what were your first impressions from Dev Talk 9 and what James was talking about?
Well, I love the way that they talk to all of us. They're really down to earth, and whenever they make a mistake, it's something that they come to terms with and tell everyone. And I don't know, it's one of my favorite things about them, honestly. It's not surprising what came out of that talk either.
Oops, sorry, I'm gonna change up my lights here a little bit. Yeah,
Now you're not sitting in darkness.
Yeah, no, I'm back. Oop, wrong button. So I was actually really happy to hear a lot of the stuff that we had talked about last week became topics that they talked about. Which, I mean, I guess maybe that's just being like, or having the pulse of the community and everything, and kind of like what we're seeing they're aware of. A lot of that being kind of like, we talked a lot about the Living Legend stuff, those changes, and that there's going to be more changes coming. Some of the Count Your Blessings stuff. But I think the biggest news that came out of it was the initial ban that we got. We got a ban right out of nowhere, I think. Well, not out of nowhere. I think if you watched what Milwaukee's event, then it was totally expected. But the Kraken's Ether Vein.
Yeah.
They
let's I would say some people were riled up over that this past week. Maybe even more than they should have been, because LSS I didn't expect what they said, but I actually loved it. But it's just because I'm a combo player, honestly. They actually said that we knew about it, and we said it's Living Legend, so, let's see what happens. We don't think it's that bad. And they admitted that they were wrong. They said they overplayed their hand, right? But, I mean, okay, they said that one was too easy. Like, okay, drawing 30 cards with the amp onto the Kraken, it was too easy. They shouldn't have let it happen. But still, there was that moment where it happened, and that was crazy. And it's still bricked in the final and lost anyway, so happy endings all around.
I was interested to hear them talk about the fact that they almost let that combo loose earlier on. I think there was a Dynasty they were talking about, like they were potentially printing another card that would have comboed crazy like that with it, but then they're like, well, no, we'll hold it off. And
it's probably for the best.
Yeah,
because they even commissioned art specifically for this card that was going to pump the Kraken, and yeah, I think they probably realized whatever it was not going to be good.
Yeah, and that actually keyed back to another thing we were talking about a bit last week about like that development time. And I think we were previously, they had talked about 18 months. They didn't go exact date time this time, but they're talking about that lag of design time versus like what we get. They're like, oh, it's over a year, right? And then mistakes they made over a year ago finally come out now, and they're like, come on, no, like don't be so hard on us. Like we learned our lessons over the last year. And I think we see that in some changes to the sets, but sometimes it takes 3-4 sets before we see corrections that we that we see, right? Like if there's an issue like potentially we see with like bright lights, we're like, oh, they've got to fix that. But I mean, that's, if they hadn't addressed it already internally, it would have been like 18 months before like an actual fix came into it. So, you know, I'm glad that they kind of put that out there to kind of hopefully temper some people a bit, because some people get real harsh, like, oh, how could you make this rash decision? Like, didn't you see what happened last set? And it's like, well, you know, that time period is
I think
pretty far
the
apart.
internet lets people really let people have it for no good reason sometimes, you know? So
Yeah.
LSS devs are no different. They're kind of in the crosshairs whenever something bad happens. There's the trolls that are always going to come out. Because I mean, for the most part, you know, it's mistakes that are gonna happen. I Every time I see people being extra hard on them, it's just like, what trading card game exists that they didn't mess up a card? And if they weren't making cards interesting enough to be messed up, like, would we even care? Would this game be fun if they weren't taking risks in game design, you know?
Right. The other thing I was actually very curious about, and I think something that we talk about offline a lot, is the state of both blitz and like the ability for casuals to kind of enter the game. And I always thought when the game first came out, like, you know, early on, like Arcane, Crucible, I'm like, man, blitz is where it's at. Like, quick games, not a huge tie up. I'm like, CC is not going to go anywhere. Obviously, that was a faux pas on my side, but I'm like, you know, blitz is for the casuals, right? Like when we hear James talk about, he's like, oh yeah, that match was super quick. It was only 30 minutes. That's a long time for a card game. Like,
Yeah.
and if that's, you know, that's short. That doesn't really leave it open for the casuals. But I think, you know, they're talking now about, they kind of overlook blitz a lot. It's not really as much of a concern in their mind, and I think they're seeing that as a big problem that they now need to address. And that was like a big balance issue as well. And
Yeah, if a
understand both
hero is
sides,
as
right?
yeah, I mean, if a hero is as good as Zen is, and they speed run in classic constructed, they are going to extra speed run in Blitz. Because generally, when they speed run like that, it's because of burst damage, and burst damage is twice as effective with half the health, right? So, uh, I think that format is pretty hard to balance for, and I think that's why Star of the Show never had a young version. They only made him adult because they kind of knew that he was too strong. I mean, they probably thought he was fine, but strong enough that he shouldn't have been in Blitz. Uh, and I think they couldn't do that with Zen because it's a draftable set, and yeah, that's about it. He's like a physical Kano. Would say that the casualness of it, I guess you want to say, is very, it reminds me of Hearthstone. And a lot of people that like CC aren't going to like something like Hearthstone, I don't think. I don't think there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, there's been enough of a competitive market now. I'm not sure with, you know, how much printing has plateaued. At least not. We don't know if for the last two sets, but the, you know, the previous 3 or 4 sets going up to part of the Mistville, they those numbers came out during Collectors Week, and you know, printing's real flat. And you know, I always joke, you know, with Magic the Gathering, right? It's like 95% Timmies and casuals, and then like 5% spikes. Flesh and Blood has been pulling all those spikes over, and then I learned today that apparently a lot of those Timmies on the Magic side are all moving towards the Arcana. Kind of a weird exodus from Magic at the moment. We'll maybe get into that a bit more later, but like that spike centricity of this, or at least people's view of it as being highly competitive. I mean, you have to be good at memorizing. You've got to know meta stuff. You got to be able to be okay with the sideboarding, much more so than you can, I think, with the Magic side.
Yeah, there
really do love
definitely
them.
is.
Yeah.
There's a high bar for entry, because in Magic the Gathering you can play an aggro deck and win 2 out of 3, you know, hopefully just blow them out on the first one and then win one of the 2 when they don't draw their, you know, hate for your Arcbound Ravager or whatever. And in Flesh and Blood, you sit down, you see the hero, and you've got to go, okay, I need to know what I need in my deck right now on the spot. And you know, if I lose, I lose. You know, there's no second and third rounds in Flesh and Blood, because if they were, we would have 3-hour long rounds, and that would just be absurd.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's kind of where I'm always keeping my eye out, because I think for the health of a game, you've got to see like the more fan-driven stuff, like Magic had, well, we used to play Two-Headed Dragon, and then there was like EDH, and EDH popped off way hard, right? And now it's pretty much the only format that anyone plays. And then, and even in a game like World of Warcraft, right? The people judge the state of the game by how many RPers are there in the Goldshire Inn, right? Like, most people aren't raiding. People who are just playing to have fun, quick little bursts of entertainment, those are the goofballs. Like when the Goldshire Inn is empty, the state of your game is in a bad spot, and that's kind of where I don't want to say Flesh and Blood's in a bad spot now, but if they want to expand at a greater rate, now that I think the sets are in a much better place, I don't know if they would want to do it as much prior to Part of the Mistveil. I think now that they've got more, I think with Rosetta they show that they have the tempo down of like how they want the cards to come out, the balance is there, like the QA is there, where they can actually have a large influx of players without it being too messy or frightening off too many people.
Yeah, I would actually pretty heartily agree with that, because Rosetta is pretty awesome. Like, I love playing Draft and Sealed, and I liked Mistveil, but I could see how a brand new player would get turned off on Mistveil, if only for the two-sided cards, because a lot of times a new player will show up and they might not even want to sleeve their cards. They're just going to shuffle up and play. And then a new player shows up and you're like, oh, we got these $12 Dragon Shields. You're going to need to buy those too, unless you don't want to play any of these Transcend cards, right? So
yeah, and the one design decision that they talked about that I don't know if I'm totally on board about is they're like, you know, when we come out with a set, we want to see all the new heroes in the top 8, and they've got 3 out of the 4, you know, hitting top 8s, and I really don't know if that's necessarily a guaranteed good thing. Like, it's good because it means your heroes are competitive, but if your top 3, or if 3 of your 4 new heroes are the only ones in the top 8, then is it really that balanced? It might be balanced against each other, but that kind of makes me feel like some of the older heroes aren't getting as much love.
Oh, I think they all take turns, right? You know, not just because somebody hasn't necessarily had their moment in the sun doesn't mean that they won't ever. I hear what you're saying about it being possibly a bad sign. Like, obviously, whenever Starvo came out, and it's just like Starvo. You know, I know Prism and Viserai also had some game into him, I believe. Well, it was a rock, paper, scissors. Anyway, what I would say is I think that there's enough heroes that aren't from the newest set to prove that there is that diversity. Because I think some of it is flavor of the month. because it's like, oh, you look at Calling Leon, there's so many enigmas, and Pablo Pintor won it on Enigma, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 enigmas total in the top 8. But there's also an Azalea, there's a Prism, and there's a Verdance and an Aurora. So you've got 2 of the new heroes and 1 of the hero from the last set, and honestly there could have been another hero from the last set, because we see it in Battle Hardened Milwaukee. There was Sage Husanu made it to the top 8 with new. But I mean, even there, Viserai, Bolton, 2 Verdants and an Aurora. Sure, Viserai took it home, Nick Gabler. But you hear all that, and you got to go the whole way to Japan to find the Florians. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 Florians in Battle Hardened Tokyo. And the best part about that, in my opinion, it's the one part that I really wanted to call out, because I used to play a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the way that, I mean, aside from the ban list changes between the 2 Yu-Gi-Oh! Versions, you know, the OCG and the TCG, like, Japanese people play trading card games differently. 3 of these Florians were Rune Chant OTK Florians.
Oh. Yeah, that's actually something I noticed a lot, especially if you play games like Heroes of the Storm was notorious for this, where the meta team builds and even play styles would be completely different between the US teams that would play or in ranked, and like Korean players were way more jumpy over the walls. They had completely different hero picks, and you could watch a game without knowing where they're from and then tell where they were from. Like, culturally, you just see these little pockets of meta, and I think I noticed that, gosh, a couple months ago we were talking about the same thing, where I think it was in parts of Europe, where we were looking at very different deck lists than you would see. I think when I was making my Living Legends deck list, I was like, because I was trying to like compile like how much overlap like different heroes decks had, and then when I went to like Europe, like their deck comps were completely different than I would see everywhere else. And I think that was before Japan got players, but I'd be interested. I might want to do a compilation of the decks now and see how they are. But yeah, no, it's very different. I really appreciate that. I think that's actually a sign of health too, because you're not just getting like the same decks every single place, because that means there's not just one way to play every hero, right? And we saw that especially in, I think, Milwaukee, where both the Verdances played 2 different Verdance decks, and that was really cool to see.
Yeah, that one was interesting, especially at the end, simply because like they had that poison the well interaction. I don't know if you caught that. It was at the very end. There's like this niche ruling for how life gain and losing works, which Josh Scott he put out some article, or maybe not even an article. I think I just saw a screenshot of what he said, where, you know, it was all because of Shiana, because she would copy other heroes' life total. So if she were to copy Kano, she would go down to 15 life, and then even if she were to come back to 20 life, that's fine, right? But if she, like, let's say she was at 5 life in Shiana version, and then she copies Kano and becomes a 15 base life hero, she just dies on the spot. Because the way the damage works is that the damage is assigned. And they, at the end of the game, the Verdance played Heartbeat of Candlehold. And this doesn't even matter, because this Verdance was going to lose anyway. I'm like 99% sure. It was pretty cut and dry anyway. But Heartbeat says gain a life, gain a life, gain a life. And Poison the Well only deals damage and stops the first instance of gaining life, not a whole source. So that one life becomes a loss of life. So if you're at one life and you lose one life at 0, the game state is not checked until the card finishes resolving. So then you'll gain a life, and then you'll be at 2. But you have to do a double poison the well for that to kill the Verdance, because then she would be at 1, having lost 41 life. That was the exact example that Joshua Scott showed to explain it. And I just thought it was funny, because even in the moment I was like, I think that didn't kill, but they fist bumped anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really like, we talked about count your blessings and its fit in the design of it. And I think we were on different sides of that argument, about like the spirit of the game, like does count your blessings fit in it? And
Well,
they addressed it in the video as well, right? Like James and them is like, there's enough counters to it, right, that you just got to sideboard better. I think he just called everyone a bunch of scrubs. And he's like, you've got at least 2 options to put in your sideboard to deal with count your blessings. He's like, and it doesn't, the problem was that they thought games were going too fast, which is why they got rid of the books and they got rid of Art of War. But count your blessings slowed things down, and they said we don't want it too slow, right? We don't want all of them again, but slowing down the game a bit is okay, and there are plenty of counters. So
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, maybe even yourself included, especially since you don't play too much, like before Count Your Blessings was a card, like there are plenty of cards that don't have block values, and when you're a new player and you're experimenting with them and you start throwing a whole bunch of cards that don't block into your deck, you'll quickly find out how much that can screw you. Now, maybe that risk is a little bit alleviated because it's an instant that can gain life, but we're talking about, unless something's been set up for the entire game up to this point, then they're pitching 2 and gaining like 5 life, let's say. So they've burned 2 cards out of their hand to gain 5 life, which is about on par with blocking with 2 cards. And that's not broken. It gets more broken if you let them have 8 of them in their graveyard and actually cast them all. But if you're an aggro deck, or if you're an assassin deck, or something that plays a little bit mid-range, bring in the Gravekeeping. That was one of the ones that James White brought up specifically. And it's just like, this is a 1-cost attack. It comes in for 5 at red and banishes a card from the graveyard. So that means that card, if you think, oh, I hate playing against Prism, so I'm going to make sure I have some extra 6s in my sideboard. Well, if you hate Count Your Blessings, put the Gravekeepings in, because if you think about that math, you Gravekeepings them for 5 and banish 1 Count Your Blessings. For every Count Your Blessings left in their deck, it has prevented 1 life gain. So that costs 1, and if they have 7 Count Your Blessings left, you have saved yourself 7 life off that single Count Your Blessings if the game goes long.
Yeah. But I just thought it was interesting, and how quick they were, how defensive they were almost about it, was sometimes I think, and there's some divorce between like what they practice in-house ahead of time and like the QA, because it sounds like they play a ton, like, right?
Absolutely.
So like, after them playing for like a couple months, and then like knowing every counter to count your blessings, and then like it actually hitting the field, and within a week they're like, what, how come people haven't figured that out yet? It's like, I bet you guys didn't figure that out in your first week either. So cut these guys a bit of a slack, right? So I found that really interesting. And in line with like Art of War and the books, I was kind of surprised that they were talking about high octane so much, and high octane very likely getting banned in the near future.
I think here is weird because on its face, it already draws a card and replaces itself, so that's great. But an action point for every time you boost. And that is the part that is design limiting space, right? Because you can't make good payoffs for action points whenever you print a card that just says basically, get an action point for every card in your hand. Because for the most part, you're just going to be boosting, and then you've got 4 action points, and if you're Nitro Mechanoid, you're just swinging with the Nitro Mechanoid 5 times, So it it already enables a pretty strong deck. Now, that means that there is a limit to like how good a boost card can be, because if it goes off on that same turn, like a boost card probably shouldn't be able to, make somebody discard a card on hit. I don't know. Maybe they'll do something else with a different kind of mech in the future that they might get them some kind of disruption like that. But mech is like the epitome of the red deck wins, in my opinion, because it boosts, and that is basically, burning yourself. Like, if you ever played Vexing Devil in red deck wins, you don't really care that you're going to get nailed for the damage the Vexing Devil does to you, because you know that you are going to kill them first.
Yeah, I mean, looking through like all the discussion about like the big bands and everything, I just don't think I saw anything about high octane, and I think they might have almost tipped their hands a little early on that, because I was looking today, I was like, I wonder what high octane's going for now, and it averages 0 to 3 sales every single day. The day that video came out, 25 sold immediately. So I think people are like, oh, is high octane really that broken? Let's build around that real quick. And now
I think that just has everything to do with people not really being willing to like try things until somebody tells them it's good. Like, anybody who's actually played high octane knows it's a great card. But if you're new to the game and you hear the creator of the game say that that's, one of the cards we're thinking about banning later, as long as it's still cheap, I mean, who cares? If you're spike enough to get into Flesh and Blood, you're probably trying to buy a deck that's going to win.
Yeah, I mean, they're only sitting around like 10, $11, I think, right now. So it's really, I mean, for FAB cards,
I didn't expect it to be double digits, to be honest.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
No. Yeah, I didn't. That one wasn't on my radar. That's crazy.
Yeah, because I think it was only about $6 or $7 a couple of weeks ago. I think everyone buying them. It's kind of raising the price on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of a commotion around Dash, because Dash IO, that new Armory deck, just came out, and that's, people are buying high octane to upgrade that, I'd bet. I don't think they put high octane in it, otherwise the price of high octane would have tanked.
So normally after a set comes out and I'm looking at sales, and like I said, most people chase the meta, right? They're looking at the decks, they're looking at Milwaukee, Tokyo, Lyon, like what decks won, I want to build that deck. The one thing that has interested me the most about the last week since we last talked was there seems to be no rhyme or reason to what people are buying. I'm seeing cards for every class, every hero moving, and a lot of them. And I don't know if that's new players coming in and building decks, or there was a new dumpster dive article. I don't know if you read the dumpster dives, but
I might have missed the latest one, but I do generally read them. I like those.
Yeah, that's if you're not familiar, dumpster dive is kind of like a pauper style, an article on like pauper or like cheap decks. And I usually see a little burst of all the cards listed in those, just people who are looking to get into the game, or don't want to invest too wildly on a new hero. But no, just across the board, I'm seeing no real rhyme or reason anymore. Like up until last week, I would say everything was going, all the every Entwine Lightning obviously went out, every Count Your Blessings went out, Earth Farm went out, but now it's everything. There's no.
I mean, that's great, right?
Yeah. I think that's good, right? That's a good turn that we're seeing now, because like you said, people are. I think because of the price, people are more inclined to just do what wins, right? Like, but now I think we're seeing a lot more than that, and I really appreciate seeing that.
I think one thing that really doesn't get talked about much, and it's the fact that if you were to buy an armory deck and take the time to learn how to play the game and like really understand how to play, understand that you can it'll take a lot of reps. You got to learn a lot of decks. But if you learn how to play well, there are plenty of people at your local armory that you will beat without buying a single, because it's just, I play with my wife all the time. And I used to always build a deck for her, build a deck for me, and play. And there is a skill gap there, and a lot of times it's just, she's just having fun. I'm not trying to stress her out too much, but I'll switch to just an armory deck without any upgrades, and it's still just a fair fight. Like, if you take the time to learn this game, people's games are not perfect out there. There's room to win with $100 or less deck. Maybe not a top PQ, that's not possible, because there is so many spikes that it's just like you'll get somebody traveling to that event that will beat you.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing about like all the events that they talked about, I think the biggest change they were talking about, the details aren't out yet, but the idea of changing Living Legend came up because of how fast Zen zoomed in and out. And it was like almost heartbreaking hearing James talk about how sorry he was about Zen going out so fast. Like, he seems like,
well, I think they were mad when they did it with Star of the Show, and I think now that they've done it twice, they're like really kicking themselves. And you know what? If it puts fire in their belly to like try and avoid that type of stuff in the future, great. But Zen was cool. If he just had everything at once. Like, I don't want to say that bans fix everything, but if they would have just maybe banned Bonds of Ancestry and Art of War before the set came out, like if they said, hey, we think the game is getting faster, we just released some heroes that may be able to abuse these things, making an Art of War and Stride of Reprisal to banish your Tiger that's worthless for 2 free cards. I think if they would have just banned the things before the set came out, we could have seen a more healthy Zen deck.
Yeah, I kind of kick myself, like, because I remember when they made the changes to Living Legend before, or just a couple months ago. I was like, oh my gosh, like, they're reducing the numbers so much, like, but they're also including so many new events, though. I mean, I was assuming that heroes would spend too long before hitting Living Legend. I was like, oh, it's going to be 2-3 years, but nah, I think Zen did his little speed run. So I kind of like the fact that now the idea will be moving forward that they're going to have set numbers of Living Legend points that divide up based on how many events they have. Though they haven't done they haven't disclosed the exact math. I think when are
My
they?
eyes might have glazed over while they were talking about that part. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah. I think, is it Osaka's coming up, right? Uh,
yeah.
so I think they said that they were going to announce everything official. I think was it at Osaka? It was either Osaka or the next. I think it's Osaka because they were talking about it being the next big,
Yeah,
like
and
State of the
that's
Union.
Worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So yeah, they said they'd have all the more refined details then. But I thought that was really interesting, and I think that probably does make more sense and will keep people out of Living Legend. Though I mean, it sounds like we're getting some big news about Living Legend too. Maybe event wise, they seem to be really hyping up Living Legend, the format, getting it more involved in like tournaments and stuff. So I'm curious to see what else they have in mind.
well, the
Okay.
they're old Magic guys, right? I think, we're finally seeing a whole bunch of decks in Living Legend. We had a huge ban wave, so there's a whole bunch of cards that you can only play in Living Legend. They're building their legacy format. They're building the high power thing that is for special occasions, maybe. They're not going to have it every single calling, right? But it's awesome that there's that other version because, you know CC, a lot of people think is the only real competitive format. There's a lot of people that do have a lot of uh things to say about Blitz that aren't exactly positive, and so it's nice to have more than one format that people might find competitive. Although if they continue to allow certain things like the Kraken, and I have a feeling that there's going to be more belly aching to come with that format.
Yeah, and with all the heroes in there being at like a certain power threshold, I almost wonder, this will be my, not, I don't want to say conspiracy hat, but I would be interested to see if they introduce certain extra powered heroes directly into Living Legend instead of them earning it. Like,
I don't know how I feel about that.
yeah, well, so I think I was thinking about that the other day because, you know, I think I was looking at like Sutcliffe's research notes, and I'm like, Sutcliffe is mentioned everywhere, right? And the head of Sutcliffe is a mentor for Chain, and I was like, what other big names are mentioned on these? And then there's of course Findall, right? Findall doesn't get talked about a lot, but if you look at, I think it's the reverse of the Heart of Findall, one of the promos for it, they talk about like this big legendary creature, in the heart of the woods that would,
Oh, is
come
that the
forth.
Rudy Art promo that's on?
That I don't recall if it was the Rudy one.
Yeah, Rudy had that kit that he put out that had the art versions of the Arknight Shard, the Eye of Ophidia, Heart of All, and I believe the Grandeur before it came out was even in that.
Oh, you're losing frames.
No, no.
Me. Sorry, you went a little robot-y there. But
Let me try and turn some more
yeah,
stuff off.
that's right. But yeah, so that's how I was wondering, like, if they're like slowly, even on like hard, like, I mean, it's a promo, but like, if they're talking about like, legendary creatures, and I mean, Final's not the only one, right? There's other big names that we see, uh, not as frequently. I mean, I don't know. I could just see them popping that out as like a little surprise or a special promo or something crazy, down the road.
Think
But
I
it
mean
being, but then you don't want it underpowered, right? Like I wouldn't want to put a legendary creature on the same footing as like, Well,
Okay, so
like
you're
fire or
imagining
anything.
here like a Fyendal hero card, right?
Yeah, someone who's a little potentially more powerful than your average hero.
I think something like that would probably be better for something like what we were talking about earlier. Like if they were to like you were talking about two-headed giant, but dang, what is that other one? Do you remember the Magic format that was Nemesis? Was it Nemesis? Or it was something.
What?
I can't
Yeah.
remember, but it was the format where it was like you play as like a super powered deck versus more than one opponent. I could
Oh
see them
yeah.
doing something like that.
Yeah, I do wonder how many things got hinted at because they've just totally dropped the PVE talk, right? PVE was kind of like oh well, maybe it'll be this season, maybe it'll be out in the next set, maybe it'll, like
I don't
I
think that they would have wasted their time printing words like party on United We Stand. I don't think they would have made Corsham the way that they made Corsham if there wasn't like they honestly want to do it, I think, but you
there's
can't
like a
force
balance
it.
issue, right?
Yeah, there's something. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Well, I think that comes back to even like the CC and Blitz, right? If you've already got to balance cards to be fair in both CC and Blitz, and they're already kind of slipping on the Blitz side of things, though they're going to be trying. Now you introduce a PVE type format as well, then like balancing between the three of them can be way trickier, I think. And I think maybe that's
Well,
I
how
would love
balanced do
upsides
you
of.
need a PvE format to be? Like, what do you mean? Like, you're worried that if they were to let's say they move forward with something like a powerful deck that multiple people would play against at the same time. Let's say they do that. Would would you necessarily have to care too much about how things interact with that deck as long as it, you know, didn't totally I can't even think of how it
Well, I
would
mean,
ruin the experience.
well, because if it's always a blowout in one way or the other, then no one's going to want to play it. There's got to be competitiveness even in like those fun formats, because even if it's like a 3v1 or a 2v1, and like there's just no way for the one person or the two people to win because the one person is just always way too powerful, or the two people can always burn them down too fast or something. Like there has to be that balance of, I mean, almost a 50-50 chance, right? Two equal players should
Yeah.
have it. Yeah. So, but that's the thing, is in an asymmetric card game like that, like if you have that powerful hero, how do you make them more powerful if not with more powerful cards? I mean, just bumping up the health isn't necessarily enough. So, I mean, maybe the weapon slot, maybe the hero ability, but then yeah. So
Well, I think they could
that's
get really wild with it, like make three new colors, make it like, a green, purple, and orange or something, and that's your pitch 4, 5, and 6, and everything in that deck is based on basically having double of like double the power, double the pitch, etc. That'd be
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they would just need something to differentiate. I mean, maybe if they didn't have cards, or cards that could only be played in certain formats, but then I mean that'd probably be how they'd have to do it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like they could always just make a deck that it's like if you're playing this legendary creature deck or legendary hero deck, you can't modify it. You have to use these cards that are in it, but those cards are really strong.
Yeah, that'd be so. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, that's just been one of those things in my head, right? All the time. That the fun casual. Like, what would I like? I don't ever want to just sit and play a C game. Like, to me, that doesn't sound fun, right? Like when I played Magic, what I found fun? whipping out 50 squirrels and throwing them at you. Like, if I lost 9 out of 10 times, I don't care because I'm having fun throwing around squirrels. Like, that kind of game, or like crazy. We used to have like crazy. What was it called?
It just
Like
sounds like you're a
generals
Prism
games.
main. You wanna throw
Yeah.
out 18 Spectras onto the field and ping them for 1 a million times.
Yeah, yeah, almost. Well, yeah, or you get like a 50-50 squirrel, or 50-50 squirrels, and you run crazy on over somebody. But, you know, even that, like, Bloomborough just had their fun rabbit deck. Like, a rabbit deck sounds like a blast. I don't know. Those little goofy ones. Like, when we'd play generals, like, having, like, crazy slivers, and I don't know. Of course, I guess I'm always a sucker for a tribal deck. But, I don't know. I like to have fun. And when I think of things like that, you know, like EDH was really fun. And that, I think, brought in way more casuals than Standard ever did. So I think that's just what needs to happen with Flesh and Blood. Like, if they're not going to design a fun casual format, I think there just has to be a fan created one. Like, we need our EDH for Flesh and Blood. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I've had some ideas that are just like half baked, but like there could be so many combinations. Like you're already talking about how it's impossible to balance. And the fun part about EDH is, it's supposed to take a little bit longer and it's more political. So I mean, maybe they could do some kind of combination of UPF, like you're meant to have, at least 4 people playing it. And then let's say, it could be like Ultimate Pit Fight Tag Team, and you build 100-card singleton deck. Let's say it's 100-card singleton deck, because I do think that one of the original things that drove people to EDH, I could be wrong here, but I think one of the original things that drove people to EDH was the fact that you had to come up with 100 single cards that were different, and there just aren't 100 overpowered cards for you to choose from. So you have to be creative and, put something together that's like cohesive, even though it's a mishmash of everything. And I think maybe if we were to make something like you pick 2 heroes, you get 2 sets of equipment, you shuffle the deck together, but now you're this amalgamation of like what does a rune blade and a guardian look like fighting together against a Kano and you know Verdance, like a double wizard matchup. That could be crazy.
yeah, I don't know. I think when I look at like the board, what always intrigues me is like your weapons, your armor. You've got, your book of spells, and I just immediately think like Dungeons and Dragons. I think it would be kind of cool, maybe like a multi-stage, like you and a friend, or you and 2 friends, kind of going against a sequence of like more difficult ones, more difficult, like almost like bosses. There used to be a way to test magic decks. I don't know if it's still viable anymore, where it would be called like fighting goldfishes, and then like every turn you would summon more and more goldfish, basically just tokens, and like their life would just like slowly increase, and you would just try to like burn them down, and it was a way to like test it like without having another person.
You realize that
Think,
goldfishing has become the standard term for deck testing?
Oh, is it? Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're
Yeah.
you're using the ancient texts whenever
Oh, okay.
everybody in this scene is just like, "Oh, goldfishing?" Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, kind of like the same. Where I think it would be cool if you had like maybe like you have a buddy, you and your buddies start off with like a common set of armor across the board, and you're all young heroes, and you're facing off against like overpowered, maybe slightly adult heroes, just because they have increased health by default. They could have like, you could have small decks, like maybe like 20 with like yeah, maybe only like 20 cards, like
Ooh,
a
that gave me a
spell
great idea.
spell
So
like
what
a spell
about
pool. Yeah.
What about in the storyline? They had a young Dorinthia where she goes off into the wilderness with her party, and the brutes kill everyone but her. Like they could easily take stories like that and be like, here's this. You're Dorinthia and three party members. See if you can help her, rescue her team this time. Something like that.
Yeah, and I think with the way that armor and stuff is set up, like I would want to start off your merry band with just like common or maybe like one piece of rare armor. Like start off with a full set of iron rod or something, right? Kind of not great. And then as you defeat like bosses in sequence, maybe have like 4 or 5, and then you can like win armor from an armor pool, like get a rare or get a super rare or a majestic or a legendary piece of armor depending on what you have, and gear up that way and change out your weapons. Or I think there's a lot of potential there with how gear is set up in this game. So I don't know, I'm always just thinking about it. I really just need to sit down and play it out a bit, but I think the game's just made like that, right? It's made for it. They've got all this lore, like you said. I mean, they could do those types of storylines super easily. I mean, I even think of even just playing D&D. You could just have a tabletop game really easy with these characters, and all of like the armor and the weapons is there. Like the spells are already created. The spell book is there. Level.
Yeah,
them
you
up,
could easily
right?
use a
Like,
Pathfinder rule system for it, right?
yeah. So I would really love to see something like that. And that's just something that I think would be cool to like do either in, I mean, once you go to like tabletop, then you're kind of bypassing all the cards, but like if you could build something cool like that with like cards, because then you don't need to have a bunch of crazy cards, right? Who doesn't have 30 iron rot sets like laying around, right? Like that's something that could be very casual, easy to get into. You could just have a bunch of like little decks built up for like popper style even, and just see.
Yeah, I was
It,
just thinking it's
yeah,
just the loot deck that you shuffle up like the community chest in Monopoly or something.
yeah, yeah. And that's no different than like a loot pool, right? And
Mm.
you kill a bunch of goblins in Pathfinder, and boom, there's your loot. Just flip 4 or 5 cards, or depending on how you're going. And I don't know. It's just those are the things that keep me up at night, right? thinking about it, because I don't know. I really like the design of the game. I really like the lore. I love the art. I like the
Just not
system.
enough to play it.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't. I mean, the game's too complicated. I mean, not complicated, but it's way too competitive. I don't want to deal with that, right? I want a fun, casual format, and I will make one if I have to. At this point,
Well, we'll have to see if that pays off. I mean, maybe, you know, uh, all it takes is to actually try and test those off the wall ideas and see if it sucks, right?
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I was actually thinking about that. I was like pulling out some cards earlier. I was like, because I mean, there has to be some balance to it. It can't be too easy. You can't win every time. Really, you can't probably win more than 40% of the time, or else without challenge, no one who wants to play a game you're going to win every time, right? So it's an interesting idea, but
Yeah, that was another thing that I was worried about for the PvE part of it, because if you do make it really strong, like, then are you still like, are you going to bring the MMO like gear check into real life?
oh
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like I could just imagine like, hey, do we want to have this pool of 4 people? We're gonna try and kill the boss version of Chain, and but we need a fourth person, and then the fourth person that joins doesn't have all their legendary equipment, and you guys lose, and then
Yeah, and actually, this is kind of why I was reading this clip earlier. But I think it'd be cool if you could turn mentors into like mini bosses, like in it as well. Like, because I mean, when do you see a mentor played, right? Like,
pretty much never.
Right, but
But
those
I
cards
will
are
say I
gorgeous.
like Bolton's. The
Yeah.
you use the +1 mentor for Bolton in Blitz. It's money.
Yeah, I don't know. The art on the mentor cards, that full art, like full card, it's just gorgeous. I still buy them up all the time. I've got a pile of all of them
You didn't
upstairs.
go in on those the promo versions, did you? Did you see that they have rainbow foil promo versions?
Yeah, I think I have one of Best Girl, and that's it, I think. Yeah, I can't remember. Which one is it? I can picture the card in my head. I can't remember her name offhand. But
I should have
yeah.
had Fabry up to search for mentors already.
Yeah, but no, I think they're completely underutilized. Like a lot of design went into it. I mean, Sutcliffe, namesake of so many cards in the game, right? And I mean, he's just, the head carried around at this point. Like, how cool would it be to, like, maybe have him be like a final boss or like something like that. But yeah, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I'm just saying there's a lot there. I'd really love to see I want casuals. I want Blitz to get some love, and I want to see some fun casual formats. And I do sometimes see them on the subreddit, where people will be like, hey, we came up with this idea, why don't you play test it out? And they just never really get off the ground. I think if they're just targeting the wrong testers, right? The people who are hardcore enough about the game to be on the subreddit and discussing things like that aren't going to be your casuals, I don't think, for the most part. I mean, I am on there, but
Oh man, that reminds me of the post I saw today. That I saw somebody that was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about making another subreddit for Spike opinions on Flesh and Blood," and I'm like, "How long have you been here?"
Right, that's the whole subreddit, right? Like, oh man. Wow, that's hilarious. I didn't see that one. I'm gonna go meme post that as soon as I'm done here, I think.
Well, it's one of those things where it's just like, I mean, I don't there I mean, like you said, it's that 5% of spikes for MTG just really love Flesh and Blood, but like the problem is, I think even those of us that might not have been spikes at the time, you fall in love with these cards. Like, I love the way that they look, and I was never like a pro or anything at MTG. I think I only ever went to one big tournament for MTG. It was fun. It was something that I did with my friends, and I've always been competitive, but I was never like trying to be like cutting edge competitive. And Flesh and Blood, I just thought was such a good, like I couldn't help it. I play it all the time.
Yeah, tournaments didn't work out too well for me. I went to a couple. We would drive down to like Pittsburgh and hit like any like we did some of the JSS's back in the day, and then some of the more wild tournaments, and then I don't know, but I never took them seriously. I was never like, I'm gonna get the most competitive deck ever. I think like the one JSS I showed up with a deck I made the night before, and I'm like, this is gonna be hilarious. I'm just gonna play like and it was just like I don't know, it had no win conditions. I was not a great deck builder at the time, but it would just keep the entire board clear pretty much. It was like a black red murder deck. It was basically just a murder hobo, and then like
no creatures, removal only.
Yeah, pretty much. That's exactly what it was. And people would just get mad because the games last forever, and I had no win condition or kill condition, and they just couldn't play anything. And it was almost it was like someone decked out, and I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't have played that at a tournament, but I don't know. For me,
it was a mill
fun.
The hard way.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, just a flat denial deck. I don't know. I don't mind being.
You're supposed to have some kind of angel or something to go over the top once a turn. Come on.
I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I enjoy those. I have a friend who's like really into it. He's still competitive, though he doesn't leave his house anymore. But he's got like the uncut sheets of Magic cards on his walls. He's like very hardcore into the whole scene at this point. But he would always go and win most of those tournaments actually. And I was like, yeah, I don't care. Who wants to win when you can have fun? Right? That's.
Don't you understand? There is a finite amount of fun, and I must take it from you.
Oh. fun is allocated to the first 3 places.
Yeah.
Yeah. And big tournaments. Our boy Andre Mengucci, big long time Magic Pro, started his time back in 2014, I think.
That's when he top aided.
Yeah.
Yeah, he top aided. He's I mean, that's still 10 years ago. Dang. I quit playing Magic that long ago, so I didn't even know about the Mythic Invitational, but he won the first one, so that's historic.
I think I'm losing internet. I think my internet died. Oh no. Wait.
But I can still hear you.
You still see me. It's coming back up. No, my internet blipped. It must be windy out.
Weird. Windy.
Yeah, no, I dropped on YouTube, I dropped on Twitch, I dropped on Kick. And
oh no.
I'm back up. Sorry about that.
It's windy out.
Oh, that's annoying. It's gonna split my VOD. I care about that more than anything. Let me make sure the Twitch is back on. No, come on. Twitch, please. Okay, sorry. Let me. What do I even have to do? This is gonna be annoying. I think. Am I gonna have to go back?
Welcome to the stream, everyone.
Well, it's not starting again. Everything else picked right back up again. Why Twitch? But here's the problem: is Twitch is my main stream, and then I co-stream out from that. So, in order to fix this, I'm gonna have to stop Twitch, and that's just gonna kill everything else again.
Ooh,
which is annoying. Yeah. Okay. Let's just do that real fast. I guess, or or we just say the heck with it. Heck with. Sorry, Twitch. You're just not gonna have the rest of the stream. You'll have to watch the VOD.
no.
Yeah, that's all right.
Whatever.
I want to make sure. Everything is actually going well.
Oh, I think you're losing internet again.
Oh, Kick is still going fine. Son of a gun.
This is the man trying to keep a new streamer down.
Okay, we're gonna restart it. We'll see what happens. 1 second.